And then if you click here and update test patterns, then your test patterns are up to date. Also new is that the test patterns are always per default stored here in a folder in the media pool. So if you want to use them afterwards somewhere in your timeline, then you have all your test patterns, what are generated from us for your screens are now here with the screen name in your media pool. Here we'll come directly to the next new feature. We changed a little bit the way how we handle live input. Perfect. Sorry, no idea what happens, but I think we're back online. Our next new feature or new change is here the way how we handle live inputs. Before, the live inputs were down here, and they were only possible or were only usable if your clients with the live inputs are in the network. Now you have here the option to use your live inputs more as a resource. You can have here always one per default, and with this button here, you can add here live input resources. And if I click on this live input resource, I can now go to my inputs here and can say, okay, I want to have here for my local, I want to have here, you can see here now our NDI feeds in the network. I want to have here in this resource, I want to have like this stream from NDI, and on this client should be shown this one. This is now how before it worked with groups, and now you can directly select here from each client and from each server what input should be shown with this resource. You can have different scenarios, should be much easier to handle as the grouping before. Yeah. And you can also route this in the mapping tab. Mapping tab in the IO routing. You can see here now the NDIs streams. This is also new, and you can also route this directly in here. Here with IO. You can see the inputs and outputs. You can swap here between. Now it's a little bit the mess because we've really a lot of NDI streams now in the network. Here you can do the input and out, also the input routing, also as you do the output routing normally with outputs. Good. Next new feature will be a feature for your interface. You have now the possibility to get performance summaries. I will show. You can define from what outputs you want to have a performance overview. I will now click now my local outputs and say okay. And also directly down here is the possibility to configure a lock of your GUI. So I can now activate or configure my GUI. If I want to lock it, I can define allowed areas. So this is now a the timeline list, timeline transport, or the timeline time. So if they are clicked on, then they are allowed to get access afterwards if the GUI is still locked. If I unclick them, then nothing is afterwards accessible if there is no password in it. I will now insert here now a password test, and you can see it out directly the new icon here. And if I click on the icon, I have to password again, and you can see now is the GUI locked. I can still move around here with the now pointer because I said, okay, I want to allow the timeline updates, but I cannot change the screen position. I cannot change here my routing. I can even not scroll here in it. I'm not able to switch here between. I'm only allowed now to handle here the locator, and also as you can see, I can have access to resources. I can just here play the timeline, pause the timeline, and that's it. If I unlock it, I'm back online. And before we activated the preview or the summary of the performance, can see up here directly your summary of activated outputs. I will now activate here on my local server outputs. Then you can directly see here these two red and now green icons. So the status of these two outputs is now green. And if you want to see, or if one is red, then you can directly click on it, scroll down. You can see down here FPS rate, if there are dropped frames, if there are incomplete frames, or something else. Good. Then I will move on with another two cool audio features what we have. First cool audio feature is it is now possible to use to play out audio from clients. So yet it was only possible to use the master to play out audio. From now it is also possible to use your clients in the network. You can see here now my two Big Sarah Minis in the network. I can select one of them, and you can, if I select it, then you get the information of all the inputs or outputs what this device has. And as it was before, you can select the kind of audio driver, you can select the sound card, as you can select the sample rate, you can see your channels and your level. And back in the layer settings, in setup for audio, you can select here also your client, and then the audio is played out on this client. Another cool audio feature is you can now use audio input for LTC timecode. Yet it was always there was only one workflow to use SEMT LTC on our timeline with our USB to timecode device. Yet you can use directly audio input from your master server, grab a SEMT timecode signal, a normal audio signal. What you need for this is an audio device with an input signal in your master PC. I cannot activate this here now because the only input what I have here is now the microphone where I'm talking, and I don't want to mess this up here now. But you can select here also the same like here with the audio settings, with the playout settings. You can do here the same with the input settings, and can also change the sample rate, and can route here this afterwards then directly to the timeline, and can move here directly on with your timecode. Good. The next cool feature is in content encryption. Content encryption gives you the possibility to crypt content. If you get content from a customer what should not be shown or should be not given on somebody else, he can give you the content, and you can insert it in the media pool, and then you press right click. Then you have here the possibility to encrypt it. You click on it, you can say directly, you can insert here again a password. You can say where the new file should be stored and what should happen with the original one. Delete the original one, delete the thumbnail, delete the preview. And if I insert here password and press OK, then this file will be from our engine encrypted, and only Big Sarah is available to read this file, or clients, of course, from Big Sarah is possible them to read this file. Good. Then another cool feature is in our control. It's called preset grids. In control, we have here a new tool. This is this preset module here, and insert it with drag and drop. And the easiest way is to can use it directly in here, or you can open it in your browser. I will open it now in the browser. And we'll and the preset grid. What is the preset grid doing? The preset grid allows you to have here a web page directly open on your laptop, on your second display or something else, and generate here directly presets. If I select here now a layer here, then I can directly use here these pre-programmed presets, as you can see here. The opacity, like 0, 5, 50, 75, 100. How is the preset grid working? The preset grid is always going to the selected layer. If this layer is here now selected, or if this layer is now selected, then it will go to layer. The values are not stored. You can, if you press here right, you can store the values. You can also move, edit the values, or what you can also do is you can move the positions of your object. I did it now. I select the layer and then I can say, oh, here the position. Now I have here preset. I move here somewhere else, press over here and say, okay, store the position. Then you can see I can jump between positions. I can do even more. I can size them. I can rotate them. I can add here effects. I can go here to the left side. I can group them. So I can say, okay, I want to have these two layers. I can say, okay, this should be now my group. So if I select here now only this layer, I can say, no, I want to have both. Then this was my group. And then I can bring them both on 100 or on 75%. What's also very cool is all these functions or all these presets are also controllable via a lighting desk. You can program here your presets directly in your UI and use it as a UI, or can also get from external the control via ArtNet or also via TCP/IP, and they can control here or trigger your presets. Good. Something else on my.
No, I guess no. So maybe another thing of control API browser, maybe, what I can show afterwards. What I also like to, or what we can show is that we also updated Pixera quite a lot on the tracking good side.
That's a good.
So I think probably one of the coolest thing in control is now you can search them. And if I type in tracking, for example, then you can already see that we have more possibilities available. OptiTrack, TrackMan, Backtracks, type and all the kind of things. So where are they?
Even more.
Moses, for example, type, then Backtracks, then we have OptiTracks. Of course, stage position is still available. PSN. So there are also multiple. So there have been a question from Cameron. Okay, no, Bateman, thanks a lot. You already answered it. So good. I think
I will now hand over Oren.
Cool. You take over my chat.
Yes, I will grab your chat and
then we just change the seats.
Yep.
Good. So then I have the funny part of the compositing. So we also made several adaptations and improvements on the side of the compositing. So let me quickly start with probably most of the obvious ones. So down here you can already see that we have some more buttons, which you probably haven't seen so far in the 1.8. So from right to left, you know already the live input resource, which gives you more flexibility. And the next to it is not the performance bar, which looks similar on the top right corner. It is actually called multi-resource. So if I add this, I can now define actually one resource which can then contains multiple other resources. So let's have a look on that. If I put it on my timeline, then I don't see anything because it's still empty. But I can then fill it up with different videos. So now I hit the plus. I can either put in, for example, videos, standard content. I can even put in live input resources, test patterns. So what I'd like to have, for example, video 1, then I'd like to have video 2 available as well. Okay. Then I can have 4 and video 5, for example. And then I can change the position and scale it. First of all, it should be 0.5. This should be on 0, 0, 0.1, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0. And then, oops. It should be 6. Oh, I'm missing. Great preparation of myself. Go on. Bytes and shifting. What I'm doing wrong, Luca. Here we are. So and now I can change the positions of the different contents and arrange it that way. Of course, this resource also follows the settings of, for example, the clip resources. So if I then change the play mode, for example, to free loop, then all the clips within this multi-resource is going to be played in free loop. All okay? You have fun beside me. That makes me uncomfortable.
Johannes said you have to restart.
No, we don't have to restart the channel, of course. Have you restarted the computer already? Oh yeah, that's fine. As long as we can make jokes. No. Good. So these are the multi-resources which you can then also use on the timeline itself. Then second, I tidy up a little bit the mess of my colleague. So now you know how his desk probably looked like. It's already Pixar's mess. No. And I just bring in another display of a second one. Then I go back to compositing, and I'd like to showcase the next one, which is called layer reference resource. So what is it? It sounds quite complicated, but in the end, it's more or less like kind of a small subcomponent. So it works that way that I create a new timeline, for example, and that timeline I'd like to video on this clip up here, and let's do reloop so that it's constantly playing. The layer reference resource, as the name already says it, can then be referenced to a layer. Surprise, surprise. So I can then, for example, select I'd like to reference on my second timeline, and I'd like to reference on timeline or on layer 1. And I can then use this resource on my first timeline again. If I drag and drop it, let's top of it, and if it's here, then you see that it's the same content because this clip now references on this timeline itself. Example, if we flip up a little bit, so content, for example, here, change this time and playback it, then you see that is actually following the reference on this layer. It's kind of a small, or it's the first step into a subcompositing, so you can create the layer and reference it somewhere else in your project on a second timeline, on a third timeline. This is called layer reference resource. Good. So let me quickly check all the things I already explained. Multi-resource layer reference. Good. The next thing related to the timeline itself is that we also now have the possibility to change the layer or the timeline playback speed. It's like a global value. If you select the timeline, on the right-hand side, you can then find the speed factor. And if you change that, then you are playing back the timeline, for example, 3 times the speed. Also set it back to original speed. And so you can also change the timeline playback speed, for example, to 1.1 or something like that. So that's possible that side. The next thing related to the timeline is that we also made improvements not only on the incoming timecode side, also on how we can work with timecode on the timeline. And this is hidden in the assembly section here on the right-hand side. And if we have a look in here, we immediately see new buttons. So in the general offset, we can now add or subtract one frame, for example. So if you want to fine tweak the incoming timecode so that it really matches, for example, that the video really matches the audio playout, different device, you have to tweak that really fine. Then you can add or subtract plus minus 1 frame, or even in bigger steps, plus minus. If we then scroll down a little bit, then in here you can find settings which are called hot region. A time code hot region now works the following way, that you can easily define, for example, region 1. And this region is from, let's say, from 0 to 10 seconds or 20 seconds. And if you have incoming time code, the timeline only listens within this time code section. For example, which is now highlighted in green, this will be activated, or this section, we will listen to timecode on this timeline. So you can use the functionality now to, for example, to add multiple hot regions on one timeline, or in combination with the timeline offset, and then create different timelines, listening to different sections of timecode. So for example, timeline 1 is listening to 0 to 1, timeline 2 is listening to 2 hours to 3 hours, timeline 3 is listening to 3 hours to 4 hours, whatever. You can now react more flexible on incoming timecode. And after that, of course, you can then stop again the timeline manually, tweak the now pointers or whatever you want to do with it. So you're a bit more flexible in that way. Good. So what else? Many things. So the next thing on the list is called file versioning. So we also built in called file versioning so far. So for example, I prepared that already a little bit. If I now select a specific clip in my resources on the right-hand side, so beside that, you can now see that you can reduce settings here on the right-hand side. So you probably know that everything is in one line. And now you can, for example, just unfold or fold the different settings together to keep it. And in here, you can also find file versioning. And if I open that now, here you have different settings, automatically watch for versions in that specific folder, use global settings. For example, you also can define the suffix in and suffix end. In that case, it reacts on the line V. And if I open up my file in the Explorer, then you can already see I have video 4, V2, V3. And this is replicated already in the file version here, version 2, version 3. Whenever I change that, it, of course, will be transferred and it will be exchanged on it. So you can now have different file versions in your resources and use them. whatever else. What else actually? Good. Any questions so far, Lucas? No? All happy that either they are not listening to me anymore, stepped away. A frame replacement. Oh yes. Long story short, no.
Yet no.
Not yet. So far, it's really on the whole file, and not on a frame basis, like a different brand of car has.
But we know it already.
We know that, and these are things which are probably what we mentioned in the beginning. So of course, probably each feature can be extended to huge bunch of different variations and feature updates and whatever. We tried to find the baseline, which so that we can bring out a bunch of different or a huge amount of different features, which can help hopefully a lot people instead of one feature till the next. Yes, the 2110 will be the very last topic we cover, so that you still stay in here and being excited. And it's not long, so we just have, I don't know, something about 20 or 25 more features, so just a few hours more. No, it's not that far. It's not that much. Two minor things, what I also like to mention, because this can improve the workflow, or it does improve the workflow a lot on the timeline itself. So for example, if I now have a clip here on the timeline, if you right click to it, then you can find that we extended the right click menu pop up a lot. In here, we added, for example, out point to current frame. So whenever you have the now pointer in this section, it puts the out point to that section. You also have a cut at current frame. And furthermore, there's also add queue before clip. Now you have the possibility to choose which one, and the same add queue at the end of clip, which, for example, then creates a clip or a pause queue at the very end of the clip minus one frame, so that it really keeps the last frame. So that's the right clip properties. The next one is, which is quite handy, is, for example, that you can now copy paste key structure, copy key structure, and I can now go to a different timeline and paste it in here. Paste key structure. So you can create, if you have an animation, you can then copy paste it from one timeline to the other one. For it can be quite handy as well. Good. Another thing which is related to a lot of questions from a different media server is, can you do parallel mapping? Can you do perspective mapping, angular, whatever? Now we have the answer, yes, we can. And this is hidden in the effect section. If you open that up, in here you have layer mapping tools, for example, which you can then add, for example, on a layer, and on here you have them. Oh, an engine. Okay, but it shows you what I actually like to show you. Now you have the possibility to map this layer as a planar layer, for example. You can use a perspective view on it. You can also use it as an equirectangular layer, which means it's like dot spread it. You have one dot in the center, which then equirectangular, like planar, maybe circular, whatever, sends out the pixels more or less. So for example, with that, you can bypass the UV map in the compositing, just throw a picture on 3D objects where you don't have gray label. By the way, because, for example, if we now box here, color channels, cropping, for example, you can now also change the hierarchy of effects just by right-clicking on it, move up, for example, and it moves up if you want to restructure the appearance of the effects on a layer. Good. So these are the layer mappings. Now I'm coming to a quite big feature, which I'd like to prepare quickly. I'd like to add more screens. So for example, I have now, and this is also a small change in, just delete that to tidy up a little bit. And here, 4 keys. And which is also something which is quite interesting in terms of workflow. So you probably knew the section or the possibilities with screen groups. So you have one screen group and you put all the screens into one screen group, and then you had the possibility to either render it in the screen group, render it only on home screen, render it on old screen, and so on. And you probably knew also the possibility that if you dive into the screens, that here in the background, you have the possibility to select the layers or the perspectives and just move them around. Downside of that is if you change the perspectives, you're locked to that position. Of course, there are ways to animate them. But if you want to create a combination, let's say on the first setup, you'd like